Free power for ham radio, off-grid. Let's look at solar energy. Today I want to give a quick rundown of powering my amateur radio station 100% with solar energy, getting completely off-grid. I'm here in the Philippines, and the Philippines is ranked as the #1 nation in the world at risk for natural disaster. That's typhoons, earthquakes, volcano eruptions, tsunamis. It's really the epicenter for natural disaster. And with that comes electrical failures, power outages, and so we need to be prepared for continuity of operations. Originally, I explored gas, diesel, propane generators to fill in during periods of power failure, but they're still reliant on fuel, and during crises, you may not have access to fuel. And that got me to thinking of solar energy because it doesn't rely on fuel, it's self-sufficient. And whereas I was initially planning on using this only to cover periods of power outages, it got me to thinking that maybe I should just take the shack 100% off-grid and make it completely solar powered. And so that's what I did, and that's what we're going to take a look at now is my solar power generator setup for my ham radio station. If you get anything out of my videos, don't send money to Patreon, don't buy me a cup of coffee, don't visit a GoFundMe page, just subscribe and hit the like button. Here's a block diagram of the solar power generator in my shack. There's really 4 main components to a solar power system. And you need the solar panels up on the roof to collect the energy from the sun. You need batteries, normally LiFePO4 batteries, to store that energy. You need a solar charge controller to manage the charging of the batteries. And then there's an inverter if you need to power anything 110 or 220 volt AC. This is a really basic setup. So here's my entire solar kit with the exception of the solar panels, which is on the roof. I've got 2 100 amp hour LiFePO4 batteries that are set up in parallel, so it gives me 12 volts DC at 200 amp hours. There's in the center is the red and black bus bars, which are kind of the hub for my 12 volt DC. Things connect into that. I have a shunt with a power meter that basically tells me how my power status. Then I have my solar power coming in with a red and black wire into this gray and green switch, which also serves as a circuit breaker. And that feeds into the charge controller, which charges up the battery from the solar power. It will also run a load if you want to run something, power something off of that controller. I don't. I run everything off of the bus bars because my entire shack, with the exception of just a couple items, is all 12 volt DC. On the right side is the DC voltage cutoff / circuit breaker. That's a 200 amp circuit breaker, which I also use as a switch to cut the DC power to the entire system. The power inverter it's a 2000 watt true sine wave inverter. It's light duty, it's 2000 watt surge, it's 1000 watt continuous, but I only have a couple items in the shack that run off of 220 volt, it's 220 volts here where I'm at. And there's only a couple of items. One is the monitor for the mini computer, and the other is the rotator controller for my satellite antenna rotator. Both of them are very low draw, very low power consumption, so 1000 watts is actually kind of overkill for it. But that's the only things that I'm running. Everything else in my shack is set up for 12 volt DC. So a fairly modest shack here, a station here, running off the solar power. I have as sort of my base rig, it's the FT991A, the Yaesu. Below it is my satellite radio, that's an ICOM IC910. Next to it's the Yaesu G5500 rotator controller, along with the SAT, the CSN Technologies SAT satellite antenna tracking unit. And on top is the FT2980, which is a 2-meter rig dedicated. It's on 24/7. It's dedicated just to WinLink. And next to it is a mini PC with a data box connecting to the FT2980. And that is serving the Peridin, the Philippines Amateur Radio Emergency Data Network, which is serves the country in times of emergency if comms go out. And then additionally, I have a Starlink unit, which adds to the WinLink, so that if the comms do go down, not only do we have radio connectivity, but we also have internet connectivity through the Starlink, which is connected to this the mini computer here. And so here, coming from the solar generator, I have a line running to this, an Anderson power pole bank here, so I can plug all my radios and equipment into this one central location. I have it fused for 45 amps coming from the solar generator, and then each one of the Anderson power pole points has its own fuse set for the specific radio and equipment. So the big question, how much did all of this cost? Well, thankfully recently the cost of solar energy components has been dropping dramatically, and that benefits us that are building these solar energy generator systems. The cost of the panels, for two 200-watt panels, cost me $130, which is actually really reasonable. The batteries, the biggest, the most expensive part of a solar energy system, for two 100 amp hour LifePo 4 batteries, that's 200 amp hours total, it was $325 for the pair, which is a big chunk of money, but it's still cheaper than what it's been. The controller itself was only $30. That was pretty cheap, the MPPT controller. The cables were about $80. The cables, you have to have good cables for this. The inverters, I put in 4-gauge cables to power that. The cables, the power cables coming from the battery to the whole system, that's double-aught cables. Those are pretty hefty cables, about like what you find in, coming from a car battery inside the car. The inverter itself was $45. That was actually fairly cheap, but it's a light-duty inverter, only 2,000 watt surge and 1,000 watt continuous duty. The circuit breakers for the pair of them was $45, and the shunt with the battery monitor was only $20. Now, a disclaimer: this was all sourced in Asia. I bought this all here, and I'm sure that 100% of it came from China. And the cost of China equipment here in Asia is pretty cheap. So the total, all of the components, it came out to around $675. But even at that, I think in the United States, you could probably buy this setup for under $1,000, or in Europe, under 1,000 euros or 1,000 pounds. So it's still a reasonable investment. And the fact that you don't have to buy gas for it, you don't have to buy any kind of fuel, it's going to be self-sufficient, and it'll last you a decade or two. All right, now disclaimer, truth in advertising. This station is in the tropics. It's not far from the equator. We get sunlight most days. The sun goes directly overhead. It's just a great location for solar energy. It powers everything I want when the sun is shining. However, we just recently started into the monsoon season, and I had 3 solid days of rain. It was so dark we had the lights on in the house. And yeah, my battery's drained out almost completely, and so it raises a good point. When you get in periods like this, there's a couple of things you can do. Power management, just power down stuff that you don't need. I don't need the Starlink on, except for when I'm here in the shack and using it. The WinLink monitor doesn't have to be on. In other words, I can power down stuff that I don't really need. The other thing I could do is beef up the system. I could add solar panels, I could add batteries, and that will get me through those periods, those dark periods during the monsoon season. But anyway, and this is something that you have to kind of accommodate for your location wherever you are. because up north you're going to have to angle your solar panels down, to collect more sunlight. You have to calculate, the amount of sun you'll get. If you're farther up north during the winter, your days are a lot shorter. So there is a bit of calculation that will go into this to figure out what you need. So for my normal use, this station is totally satisfactory. I will probably add another battery, maybe 2 more 200-watt solar panels for a total of 800 watts and 300 amp hours in the batteries. And that would cover most of these dark periods during the monsoon season. But normally, just the 2 batteries and the 2 solar panels will get me through all my operating requirements when it's sunny. Anyway, I hope you got something out of this, maybe some ideas on building a solar power generator for your shack, whether it's to get you completely off grid or just for periodic operations. Anyway, thanks for watching. Stay tuned.